Hello everyone, my name is Jerry Wise and I'm a relationship expert, self-expert, a life coach, and the director for the Center for Self-Differentiation. And today I'm lucky enough to be down here in Miami South Beach visiting with my son, and I thought you might enjoy the ocean in the background, and it's a lovely morning this morning. And I wanted to share with you a video entitled ACOAs and PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Let me explain. An ACOA is someone who has grown up with one or more alcoholic parents or caregiver, or someone who's grown up with a drug-addicted parent or caregiver. There is also a book out there on grandchildren of alcoholics, because they are also affected by the alcoholic disease and may be affected in ways they may not even realize. And I think this video is to raise the consciousness of ACOAs who may not realize that they are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, maybe even P-small-t-s-d, certainly because of the alcoholic functioning in the home, and how difficult and painful that was growing up day after day after day. I will use ACOA and ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, or ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, interchangeably. In different parts of the country they use one or the other, and I'll just be using them back and forth interchangeably. I kind of grew up with the ACOA, and now most people say ACA. Having worked with adult children of alcoholics since about 1980, I find these things are true, or have been true. Many are in denial of their family's alcoholism and how it affected them. In fact, there's probably 30 million or more adult children of alcoholics in the United States, and they don't realize how they've been affected by their alcoholic parent growing up with them. They may decide, okay, well, if I just don't drink, then I kind of resolve the problem that my parent had who drank, and then it won't be a problem. I wish that simple answer were true. There's a lot of emotional, mental, psychic, spiritual, interpersonal difficulties that come with being an adult child of an alcoholic. I know many adult children of alcoholics are still in denial of their family's alcoholism and that it had an effect on them. They still live in the don't talk, don't feel, don't think paralysis, and cannot talk about or share the family secret or denial of alcoholism. Many don't even discuss it. Maybe both parents were alcoholic, and their friends don't even know that, or wouldn't even know that. Then even if they do acknowledge their parents' alcoholism and effect on them, they still may minimize the effect on them. And there are many reasons why they would have to deal with, well, there are many reasons why they minimize it or deny it, is because then the ACOA would have to deal with grief, anger, hurt, shame, pain that they would just rather not deal with. Now, the real problem is that by staying in denial, it doesn't fix those problems. In fact, they crop up in many ways, in work, in relationships, marriages, parenting, and it shows up in lots of ways. Many ACAs have a difficult time acknowledging the severity of the impact on them. They may say, yeah, it was rough growing up. Dad was an alcoholic and he smacked us around, and but I deserved it some of the time, and other times I don't think I did. But Mom was real loving and caring, and she made excuses for Dad, and she always wanted us to treat Dad right, even though Dad was the alcoholic, for example. And then they go, so that's basically the story of me growing up in an alcoholic home, but I'm fine now. I wish that were true. And if you are, I think it's a miracle, and I think it's wonderful. But we know that many ACAs suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder. And according to Cermak and Brown, and if you want those resources, I'll send them to you, 2 ACOA experts, they state that they suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And again, that comes from the years of the minor and major traumatic events or traumas that they experienced while developing as a child and growing up as a child into adulthood. Even some of them continue to experience those traumas even as adults with their continuing alcoholic parents. They are traumatized as they try to connect and get love and acceptance and approval from the alcoholic parent. Recently I had a client who is probably 39, maybe 40, and she has spent the last 5 years trying to reconnect with an alcoholic father who's also pretty narcissistic, but an alcoholic father, and she just keeps working at it and working at it. He keeps rejecting her, pretzel logicking her, meaning he just talks nonsense, denies his own responsibility, is inappropriate, and she keeps trying to get that love, and has not, and finally has come to realize that, you know, Dad can't really do that. The bad news is Dad can't do that, the alcoholic, and maybe the alcoholic father or mother. The good news is they don't have to do that. We can heal within ourselves. We don't need the alcoholic to recover for us to recover. And that's good news. So what are the symptoms? It's a little windy out here. What are the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? And I have it here. I thought I did. Yep. Here. And when they talk about the adult child of an alcoholic, these are the things that they talk about as ACAs experiencing. Number 1, the tendency to re-experience the trauma through obsessive thoughts and the family and compulsive re-emergence of behaviors and feelings in response to symbolic equivalence of the trauma. Put simply, we often find ourselves obsessing about the family and trauma that we've experienced, even unconsciously or consciously, and that we see that trauma or that trauma about to happen in just about everything that's happening around us, in our marriage, and so many times that what happens symbolically in our marriage then triggers us back to our experience growing up in an alcoholic family. And that obsession goes on and is painfully recurring. Secondly, there's psychic numbing with a sense of isolation. PTSD has psychic numbing because there's been trauma, mental and emotional, and a sense of isolation. You just want to be alone, or you just want to, it's hard to connect with other people. You may feel more comfortable not connecting with other people, at least on an emotional basis. Thirdly, there's hypervigilance, and that hypervigilance creates a lot of anxiety. We have a lot of anxiety with it, and we may be scanning all the time and looking to see if anybody's like our alcoholic family. But again, we do this unconsciously, sometimes consciously, but we are very hypervigilant or on guard often. Then number 4, there's survivor guilt, because we have survived that trauma, we have survived those difficulties, and we can have depression as a result of that surviving growing up in that trauma and chronic trauma that's occurring over and over. And then fifthly, there's an intensification of symptoms by exposure to events that resemble the original trauma, such as withdrawal from others. So if a friend withdraws from an ACOA, they then have their abandonment and rejection issues reignited and intensified, because it so mirrors, and it's what's in me from growing up in my family that was alcoholic. And so I become re-traumatized when a friend moves away from me, or when a husband or a wife divorces me, or when a girlfriend leaves me, or a boyfriend leaves me. That re-traumatization. And all of that is a part of that PTSD syndrome. For the ACA, it is so hard to step back and see that they have post-traumatic stress disorder, because the way they feel is all they have known. It's the water they swim in as a fish. It's just the water. I mean, there's nothing special or really bad about it. ACAs were taught to have no needs, no self-care, no self-awareness. These threaten the alcoholic family's dysfunction, and it threatens the unhealthy alcoholic family members. Thirdly, or they may think that if I have PTSD, I shouldn't bother anybody with it, because I shouldn't be bothering people. ACAs always were made to feel that they were bothering everybody, their needs, their wants, needing to be loved, cared for. You're just in the way, you're a bother, because the alcoholic took up all of the oxygen in the family. And so all the focus was on them, and not particularly on the children, unless they were focused on in a negative way, as a scapegoat or a golden child or mascot kind of roles. Or they may avoid their PTSD because it is a painful reminder of the past. So they blame their spouse, they blame their boss, they blame friends, they blame themselves, but they don't acknowledge the source of the wound, which goes back to their family. And again, I'm not suggesting that it's not about blaming our family of origin, and it's not about blaming the alcoholic. Blaming is not a healthy state. Acknowledging and recognizing the impact on you, though, is very healthy. Blaming is a different matter. Blaming only keeps us stuck as well. But we do need to acknowledge what has happened from the past, and that what we saw, felt, heard, experienced was real. Even if other family members don't believe us, even if our neighbors, our friends don't believe us, it doesn't matter. Our experience, our subjective experience, should be affirmed in what we believe that happened. Many ACAs suffer high-stress lives of over-functioning or under-functioning, working too hard, working too little, and having not enough in life. They can experience depression, anxiety, relationship failures, finding alcoholic families, finding their family and marriages to be made into alcoholic type of families, even if they don't drink. So many times I work with ACAs who come to me and say, I'm having trouble at work. Work is such a mess. I've got this boss who is narcissistic and mean and mercurial and goes up and down. I've got these co-workers who are da-da-da-da-da. And once they describe that whole work situation, they see, well, that's my family growing up. I've just recreated my family situation in my work environment. Oh my gosh. And the good news is there's a way out of that. But often we have found jobs like that. So let me share with you, so what can you do if you are an ACOA? Number one, you can get help from a self-expert, an ACOA expert, family systems expert who has ACOA competency. You can go back and heal from your trauma in a resolution way and going through recovery way. I don't think we never stop being an ACA. So it's an ongoing, lifelong recovery process. But we can go back and resolve many of the traumas and brokenness that we've experienced growing up, so that we get our family of origin out of us. So many of us just want to get out of our family of origin, but then they leave the family of origin in them. A self-expert helps you get the family of origin out of you. Get treatment for your anxiety and depression. Use a safe professional to work with to help you with psychic and emotional numbing. Frozen feelings are common for adult children of alcoholics. Acknowledge that you may be distorting your relationships. You may have some real, true, accurate, reality-based beliefs and feelings. You also may have some distortions. And so, for example, we may feel, well, yesterday I felt like my wife loved me. Today, I don't feel like she loves me at all. There's probably a distortion going on. Distortions within me. And because people don't generally love you one day and not love you the next. And again, that process of going back and forth, there's a lot of distortion with that. And we will often feel unloved because we didn't feel loved growing up. Read ACOA literature, the Big Red Book, the Yellow Workbook. Read books on ACOA and videos. There are many. I've got 125 videos on YouTube. Not all of them relate to ACOAs, but several of them do. You can write me for a list of all those videos, or you can join our Family Tree Counseling channel on YouTube. Remember, post-traumatic stress disorder is not caused by just one major event, particularly for the ACOA. It may, and I've had a major traumatic events, probably several in my life, which can cause a post-traumatic stress disorder. However, there can be what we call strain trauma or chronic state trauma, in which it's just chronically chaotic, chronically dysfunctional, chronically rejected, chronically projected onto, something that happens in the alcoholic family every day. And that chronically traumatic environment or life context for the ACOA causes this buildup of PTSD within us. The ACOA often practices defensive exclusion, in which we exclude certain things out of our life and mind, we redefine certain things, we distort certain things, we distort the information from the past. For example, when an ACOA says, you know, I don't think my father's alcoholism really affected me. As they look back on their past, they go, no, it wasn't bad. There's probably a defensive exclusion there. They're excluding their reality, and it's just easier to think that way. They can experience chronic distrust, inhibition of curiosity, a distrust of their own senses, a tendency to find everything unreal. Let me read how one ACOA suffered and describes it in this way. I thought this was a great note. And as one ACOA described it, I look at the world, people, events, and feelings through a filter. It's like a haze, a cheesecloth that mutes the intensity of what's out there and what's coming in. I couldn't tolerate my feelings without this filter. ACOAs use this filter all the time. And the good news is we can heal from that. Lastly, one of the areas I specialize in is in healthy self-differentiation. ACOAs were punished growing up for having a self, being a self. Family enmeshment was equivalent to love. Enmeshment equals love, which is true in our society as well. There was no self in the dysfunctional family, just one big clump of emotional persons. And they all basically shared a self, really. I specialize in learning self-differentiation and becoming separate from your dysfunctional family. And I think that's very critical, to become separate internally from the alcoholic family. There's so much more I could say today, but I've got to end here. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll just fall asleep and go, Jerry, you said enough. If you'd like to work with me, you can contact me. I'm fortunate to be in Miami Beach today. However, I live up in Indiana. Whether you live on the East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, or any country of the world, with the internet, we can work together. I've got many international clients. Please join our YouTube channel.